Michael, not the Archangel, here again from Salt Lake City. This is going to be a little long, so settle in for the long haul, but it's interesting stuff here. As to Willie Buck Merle's question about Satanism, just a second, let me expel a demon or two. I spent a couple of years in graduate school studying the late medieval and early modern history of European religion, mostly Christianity in its official and folk forms. For someone raised as a conservative Seventh-day Adventist and also with a large helping of Jack Chick comics, it was a very interesting experience. One of the primary things I remember from my studies is that besides the confessions of witches in the 16th and 17th centuries, having often been forced, that is, tortured, the activities that these witches, quote-unquote, admitted to were little more than straight inversions of the Christianity of the day. For example, women would gather with the devil at midnight in a secluded wood or cave, would approach him nude, crawling backwards, and greet him by kissing his backside. Black candles would be burned on an altar that would feature a consecrated host, and this would be subjected to ritual abuse and degradation, often being stomped or urinated upon, and the women would often proceed to copulate with the devil. As a side note, Jews were also accused of stealing consecrated hosts and either piercing them with a knife or nailing them to a wall, whereupon the host would commence to bleed. Notice how all these actions are incomprehensible without the paradigm of Christianity and the assumption that its claims are true. Compare the above with the true Mass. A celibate male priest would perform the Mass on holy ground, a chapel or church erected and maintained in a town for this purpose, usually during the day. The fully clothed attendees or participants would face forward. No orgies would take place, and the host would be consecrated and thereafter treated with the utmost respect, since it was the actual body and blood of Christ. Again, it must be stressed that the alleged practices of the 16th to 17th century witches, as representatives of the nearest thing to Satanism for that era, are only meaningful when viewed through the paradigm or frame of Christianity. A black mass held in the woods is only profane if one assumes that a church and its grounds are actually holy. The piercing of or urination upon a cracker is only blasphemous if one believes that the consecrated host truly is the body and blood of Christ. I find similar parallels in the breathless claims about modern Satanism made by modern Christians, leaving aside the wild-eyed assertions of child sacrifice, which neither Joe Nickel nor another investigator could substantiate in examining police crime reports for all of the U.S. over a 20-year period. Most alleged practices are once again simple inversions of Christianity that only function when the truth of Christianity is assumed. I was recently reminded of this when a relative of mine darkly informed me that the Pope has an upside-down cross on his throne. Remember that an upside-down cross commonly features in Jack Chick's claims about Satan worship. My reply was that, of course, the Pope's throne would have an upside-down cross on it. He claims apostolic succession from Peter, who is said to have been crucified upside down, and thus it is only natural that his seat of power would feature a symbol associated with the founder of that very seat. One may be convinced that both the claim of apostolic succession and the story of Peter's death are absolute bunk, but to adequately estimate the meaning within the Catholic Church of a symbol on the Pope's throne, one must treat his claims seriously. In contrast, it does not seem that most Christians find practices within Islam, Buddhism, or Hinduism to be flagrantly satanic. Oh, I don't know about that. However much they disagree with these religions or find them to be misguided, they often recognize them as separate religions with practices and theologies that are internally coherent and self-reinforcing, and not some pale derivative system that only has meaning by continual reference to Christian dogma and practice. Yet it is only by constant comparison to Christianity that Satanism is explained, thereby rendering such Satanism little more than anti-Christianity. Such an anti-Christianity may play a powerful cultural and psychological role within Christian communities, shadows of the Satan-God duality here, but it should not be mistaken as a thing in itself any more than one's reflection in a mirror should be thought to have its own positive and separate existence. One final comment on this general subject concerns the role of the converted. For the same reason that the little boy told his teacher he wanted to be a returned missionary when he grew up, some evangelists proclaim themselves converted Satanists. It can make for a great story, and it's been around in some form at least since Paul. To be clear, I am indeed suggesting that some of those who claim to have been Satanists of the worst sort are in fact simply lying. One person I regard as exemplifying this has videos on YouTube in which he claims to have worked his way up from simple occultism into Masonry, Catholicism, Mormonism, the Illuminati, Satanism, and ultimately vampirism, where he and others would gather to drink human blood. This last claim is accompanied by ridiculous assertions that his body underwent physical changes, making, oh my God, exposure to sunlight actually painful to him, a claim that makes no sense at all in biochemical terms. These outrageous, and in the case of this last, quite obviously false claims are made by a Christian evangelist, both to establish his own bona fides as well as to expose the danger that Christians need to guard themselves against. Needless to say, it probably also helps to rake in the shekels. Yeah, I think you're right, but we know that there are, as you would point out, there are modern Satanists who are just trying to be anti-Christian. Aleister Crowley proclaimed himself the Antichrist, though he did also have a new positive that is, something that made some sense in its own right, the new religion of Thelema, or Thelema, however you want to say it, the Greek word for will. Anybody named Thelma means will. He did claim to be the Antichrist because he was the enemy of Christianity and was the one who was appointed to ring the curtain down on it to begin a new era, right? Nietzsche wrote as the Antichrist not because he believed in biblical prophecy, but he was against Christianity. And these modern Satanists, LaVey Satanists, or whatever, they appeared to, be just protesting against Christianity, and they're quite open about that. Christians, if this is what you believe, well, we reject it. So if you want to call the rejection of that Satan, all right, we're happy to take the name. But LaVey-type Satanists, the Church of Satan, they don't believe in the devil even. It's very explicitly a kind of ritual rejection of Christianity as well as an affirmation of more of a pagan ethic. And there is Satanism that is parasitic upon Christianity, but that's no surprise to them. They do mean to take the other side, and they're remaining in the same symbol system in order to be a living contradiction and reproach to it. There's no particular reason that couldn't have been the case with the witches of the 16th and 17th centuries, that it does mean to reject and defile what others consider to be sacred. For them to do all this stuff, like you mentioned, doesn't necessarily mean they think the church and the sacrament, etc., are sacred. They're just trying to show that it isn't, in their view, as when P.Z. Myers, I think, nailed a Eucharistic host to the wall and said, gee, I don't hear any screaming or anything. He's not a Satanist. He doesn't believe there is, nor does he believe that there's some real sacredness to the wafer. He's just trying to show, it's just bread. It's not clear to me that the witches couldn't have actually done this stuff as a way of giving the finger to Christianity, which they found oppressive. But, as you say, the confessions were probably written for them by people who were pulling their fingernails out until they'd sign them, so it's worthless as evidence. What a nuisance for the historian.